The mystery began with a single phone call to the Carmel, Indiana Police Department on the evening of Saturday, February 26, 2022. On the line was Xavier Breland, reporting that his 31-year-old wife, Ciara Breland, had vanished. According to Xavier's statement to investigators, he had last seen her the previous night, Friday, February 25. He claimed that around 10 p.m., Ciara had walked out of their home in the Brookstone Park neighborhood, heading on foot toward a nearby convenience store. While it initially sounded like a standard missing person report, the details Xavier provided immediately triggered red flags for detectives. That night, Indiana was gripped by a brutal winter chill, with temperatures hovering around a freezing 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Yet Xavier insisted his wife had braved the bitter cold wearing nothing but a light black top and purple shorts. The anomalies only multiplied when officers searched the residence. They discovered that Ciara had left behind absolutely all of her essential personal belongings. Her driver's license, credit cards, and identification remained untouched. Even more troubling, both of her cell phones were still inside the house. Her work phone, which she used daily as an attorney, and a backup burner phone that her family noted she kept strictly for emergencies. However, the most alarming red flag for investigators was the realization that the couple's 5-month-old son, Jackson, had been left behind. Ciara's mother, Kelly Locklear, later stated without a shred of doubt that her daughter would never have abandoned her baby. Ciara was a fiercely devoted mother who woke up every hour or two just to check on her infant, and she wouldn't even step into the shower unless someone was actively watching him. The narrative that she would willingly walk out into a freezing night without money or a phone, leaving her helpless son behind, defied logic. Seeking answers, police immediately scrutinized surveillance footage from the convenience store Ciara was supposedly walking to, alongside cameras from the surrounding streets. The search yielded absolutely nothing. Ciara never appeared on a single frame, and no camera captured a woman in shorts walking through the neighborhood in the biting cold. It quickly became glaringly obvious that the late-night store narrative was a complete dead end, and that the true answers lay far outside of Indiana. With the store alibi crumbling, investigators shifted their focus to the timeline preceding the alleged disappearance, working to reconstruct the couple's movements over the previous 24 hours. Detectives knew that Xavier and Ciara were in the middle of returning to Indiana after a trip to visit relatives. Consequently, a primary focus of the investigation became the family's vehicle, a white 2017 Volkswagen Tiguan bearing Georgia license plate RMB 5869. The SUV featured one highly distinctive, easily identifiable detail: a license plate frame proudly displaying the logo of the Florida State University College of Law. The drive between Ciara's parents' home in Georgia and the couple's residence in Indiana spans roughly 11 hours. It is a grueling journey, one that inherently demands multiple stops for fuel, food, and rest. Recognizing this, detectives embarked on the painstaking task of pulling video footage from traffic cameras, gas stations, and roadside establishments along the entire presumed route. They fully expected to find visual confirmation that Ciara had safely returned to Indiana alongside her husband and their infant son. Instead, the surveillance footage yielded a deeply unsettling revelation. While police confirmed that the white Tiguan was indeed traveling north toward Carmel, every single camera angle told the exact same story. Whenever the SUV pulled into a gas station or convenience store, only one person ever stepped out of the vehicle: Xavier Breland. Investigators were completely unable to verify that Ciara was even inside the car during that entire multi-state drive. Xavier alone was captured exiting the vehicle, paying for gasoline, and buying food. Ultimately, the SUV did make it back to Indiana, but there was absolutely no proof that Ciara ever crossed the state line alive. In fact, her final confirmed sighting occurred in an entirely different state and time zone. Surveillance footage captured Ciara alive on February 24th at 7:17 p.m. outside her mother-in-law's residence in Johns Creek, Georgia. Although nothing unusual appeared in that specific video, both her digital footprint and physical trail abruptly vanished immediately afterward. It became increasingly clear to law enforcement that the missing person report filed in Indiana may have been nothing more than a calculated diversion, a deliberate attempt to construct a false narrative hundreds of miles away from where the real events had actually transpired. To comprehend how this tragedy unfolded, it is necessary to rewind the timeline and examine the life of the woman now being searched for across the wooded terrains of 3 separate states. Ciara Locklear grew up in Cleveland, Georgia, and according to her mother, Kelly, she was a true Southern girl who harbored big dreams of making it in Atlanta. She was ambitious, outgoing, and fiercely strong-willed. Desiring to be taken seriously, she followed her mother's professional footsteps, who worked as a legal assistant and pursued a career in the legal field herself. She earned her undergraduate degree from the University of Tennessee before graduating from the Florida State University College of Law, where she specialized in insurance defense. Her mother fondly remembered her as energetic, loving, and passionately driven regarding her career. Ciara seemed to have her entire life meticulously planned out until October 2020, when she matched with Xavier Breland on Tinder. From that point on, their relationship progressed at a breakneck pace. Just 6 months after their initial meeting, the couple married, and by that time, Ciara was already pregnant. Revealing court records later disclosed that Ciara had even provided Xavier with legal representation during his ongoing disputes with his ex-wife. Shortly after their wedding, the newlyweds sought a fresh start and relocated to Carmel, an affluent suburb of Indiana. There, Ciara successfully joined a local law firm, and toward the end of 2021, she gave birth to their son, Jackson. To the outside world, it appeared to be a picture-perfect life: a thriving attorney, a beautiful new home, a husband, and a beautiful baby boy. Yet behind closed doors, that new life in Indiana felt far more like a prison. When reviewing the timeline of this relationship, it is deeply unsettling how frighteningly fast everything escalated, leaving virtually no time for reflection or second thoughts. The marital problems began almost immediately after their first few dates, and according to Ciara's cousin, Shelby Campbell, the illusion of a happy family collapsed incredibly fast. Ciara, a woman accustomed to winning high-stakes battles in the courtroom, suddenly found herself facing a real-life opponent who refused to play by any rules. The disturbing reality behind her seemingly perfect marriage was later brought to light by Shelby Campbell, who was not only Ciara's cousin, but also her closest confidant. The two women messaged each other every single day, and the texts Ciara sent painted a drastically different picture from the cheerful life she projected on social media. Early in the relationship, Ciara had actually tried to break things off, but Xavier proved entirely incapable of accepting rejection. Instead of backing away, he showed up at her apartment uninvited, lingering outside her door, and began sending menacing messages simply because he discovered she was spending time with another man. Ciara explicitly warned him that she would contact law enforcement if the harassment didn't stop. Yet, whether driven by fear or intense pressure, she ultimately gave him another chance. Just 6 months after their wedding, the illusion completely shattered. Ciara confessed to her cousin in a text, "I'm afraid of my husband." In another message, she admitted, "His behavior keeps getting worse, not better. If it's like this now, what will it be like later? He used to feel guilty after saying hurtful things, but lately, he doesn't regret his behavior at all. He blames me for it." Shelby's account confirms that law enforcement was dispatched to the couple's residence on multiple occasions, both in Georgia and later in Indiana. Each time, a frustratingly familiar pattern unfolded. By the time patrol units arrived at the scene, Ciara would calm down, cover for her husband, and actively downplay the severity of the altercation. Following one of these domestic calls, an investigator even went so far as to contact Ciara's mother, warning her that he was witnessing a highly dangerous pattern and feared something terrible would eventually happen to her daughter. Ciara was acutely aware of the perilous trap she was in. In her messages, she explicitly stated that if anything ever happened to her, her husband would be the one responsible. Though she still loved Xavier, she recognized that staying was no longer safe. While Shelby frequently urged her to run, Ciara, ever the strategic attorney, knew that leaving a volatile situation required meticulous planning. She began quietly executing an exit strategy, opening a secret bank account to funnel money into, and securing a hidden burner phone strictly for emergencies. She was fiercely determined to escape, waiting only for the right tactical moment to break free. Reading these messages in hindsight, it is impossible to shake the feeling that Ciara wasn't merely venting. She was actively documenting her own impending doom. That pivotal moment finally arrived in February 2022. The fateful trip back south to Georgia began in the middle of the month. Ciara and Xavier packed their 5-month-old son, Jackson, and their large dog into the white 2017 Volkswagen Tiguan for the 11-hour drive. To onlookers, it appeared to be an ordinary family vacation. Xavier planned to visit his mother, while Ciara was eager to see her parents, Nick and Kelly Locklear, in Cleveland, Georgia. They arrived at the Locklear home on Saturday, February 19th, sparking an emotional reunion for a family that hadn't seen her since her move to Indiana. However, while Xavier viewed this as a temporary holiday, Ciara had a secret agenda. What her husband did not know was the most critical detail of all. His wife had absolutely no intention of ever returning to Indiana. Enveloped by the safety of her parents' home, Ciara finally let her guard down. She confessed to her mother that Xavier's aggressive behavior had become entirely unbearable and was escalating rapidly. Looking her parents in the eye, she declared clearly and without hesitation, "I'm filing for divorce." The escape plan seemed simple, solid, and entirely within reach. Ciara would secure employment in Georgia, rebuild her life from scratch, and raise her infant son surrounded by a fiercely supportive family. Her parents had explicitly promised that her childhood home would always remain a sanctuary. Ciara spent that Saturday night and the entire next day enveloped in the comfort of her parents' presence. Precious hours that would ultimately stand as the final moments she ever felt truly safe. Throughout the visit, she repeatedly reaffirmed her decision. She was absolutely never going back to Indiana. On Sunday, February 20th, Ciara departed her parents' house in Cleveland, embarking on a 1-hour drive south to Johns Creek. Her 5-month-old son, Jackson, was staying there at his paternal grandmother's house, and Ciara needed to retrieve him before making her clean, final break from Xavier. However, the atmosphere turned dangerously volatile, almost the moment she stepped through the door. Shelby Campbell, Ciara's cousin, soon received a distressing text message that would later serve as a critical piece of evidence documenting the unfolding crisis. Ciara typed out a bleak reality. "I'm at Xavier's mom's house. He won't give me Jackson, so I'm waiting to take him and leave." The text laid bare Xavier's cruel strategy. He was using their helpless infant as emotional leverage, fully aware that Ciara would never abandon her baby. The standoff stretched into the next day. On Monday, February 21st, at 11:17 p.m., Ciara's father, Nick Locklear, received a brief message from his daughter, asking, "I'll come back in the morning if that's okay." Nick replied instantly, assuring her, "Of course it's okay. You don't need to ask." Yet, the following morning, Ciara never arrived. When her worried father checked in on Tuesday, she texted back claiming everything was fine, but mentioned she was feeling a bit under the weather. On Wednesday, Nick reached out once more to check on her health, but his message was met with total silence. By Thursday, February 24th, his texts went unanswered yet again. The void grew impossible to ignore, and a suffocating panic began to grip the Locklear family. Ignoring her loved ones was entirely uncharacteristic of the deeply communicative Ciara. Investigators would later uncover a pivotal piece of the puzzle. On that same Thursday, February 24th, at 7:17 p.m., a neighbor's surveillance camera captured Ciara standing outside her mother-in-law's Johns Creek home. While nothing inherently suspicious appeared in the brief footage, those digital frames became the final confirmed moment she was ever seen alive. Following that timestamp, Ciara vanished completely. Her digital footprint went entirely cold, her phone fell silent, and an agonizing window of uncertainty opened, the terrifying kind that inevitably precedes a life-altering phone call. By Saturday, February 26th, the Locklears' desperation hit a breaking point. That evening, Nick's phone rang. displaying an unfamiliar number with an Indiana area code. Nick later recalled that he didn't initially panic. He remained under the firm impression that his daughter and son-in-law were still just an hour away in Georgia. He answered the call fully expecting to hear Ciara's voice. Instead, the voice on the line belonged to an Indiana police officer. In a single breath, the words that would irrevocably shatter their world were spoken. Xavier had officially reported Ciara missing. The shock waves hit the family with brutal force. First, her parents were operating under the belief that she was still safely in Georgia. Second, the behavior of the supposedly frantic husband defied all logic. As Shelby Campbell later pointed out, Xavier never once contacted a single member of Ciara's family to check if she was with them, nor did he alert anyone that she was supposedly missing. After hanging up with the Carmel police, a distraught Nick Locklear immediately dialed his son-in-law. Their brief, tense conversation perfectly captured the dark essence of the entire marriage. Nick demanded, "Xavier, tell me the truth. What's going on? Ciara told me that if anything ever happened to her, you would be responsible. So just tell me the truth." Xavier's response to his father-in-law's desperate plea was chillingly cold and abrupt. He cursed at Nick and slammed the phone down. Frantic for any shred of information, Nick then dialed Xavier's father, who lived right next door to the couple in Carmel, hoping he might offer some clarity. Instead, that conversation only solidified the family's worst fears. Xavier's father confirmed he had not seen Ciara return home at all. Just 2 days after Xavier officially reported his wife missing, law enforcement was dispatched to his Indiana residence yet again. This time, however, the emergency call had nothing to do with the search for Ciara. It was to investigate a reported gunshot. On February 28, 2022, a firearm had discharged inside the home on Baldwin Lane, and it was Xavier himself who contacted the authorities. Yet, the bizarre explanation he offered investigators immediately raised intense skepticism, especially given the grim context of his wife's disappearance. Xavier claimed he was merely moving a Christmas tree in the garage when a gunshot suddenly rang out. Startled, he allegedly fled outside before returning to the garage, where he discovered a handgun and unloaded it. Given the unfolding circumstances, the story sounded highly implausible. Xavier framed the incident as a completely accidental, spontaneous discharge that occurred while he was simply rearranging items, followed by his random discovery of the weapon. This highly suspicious explanation prompted officers to conduct a far more exhaustive search of the property, during which they recovered 2 separate handguns. At that juncture, authorities refrained from publicly linking the suspicious gunshot to Ciara's disappearance, nor did they disclose whether any physical evidence of foul play had been uncovered. Nevertheless, the presence of firearms combined with Xavier's erratic behavior compelled investigators to scrutinize him under a microscope. It quickly became glaringly obvious that Xavier Breland was far from an ordinary citizen with a clean past. The firearm incident proved to be the loose thread that completely unraveled a much darker reality. Xavier was swiftly taken into custody, though not initially for his wife's disappearance. Rather, detectives discovered an active arrest warrant out of Quitman County, Georgia, detailing serious stalking allegations. With Xavier securely behind bars on the separate charge, investigators finally had the opportunity to dissect his background. What they uncovered painted a terrifying portrait of a man deeply obsessed with absolute control. Accessing his complete criminal record confirmed the Locklear family's absolute worst nightmares. Ciara had not merely married a man with a volatile personality, she had tied herself to someone with a documented, lifelong pattern of severe harassment and domination. Xavier's file revealed a prior burglary conviction dating back to 2005. Far more disturbing, however, were the toxic details surrounding his relationship with his ex-wife, the mother of his other children. Investigators learned that Xavier had once hidden a GPS tracking device inside a stuffed plush toy, giving the toy to his daughter solely to illicitly monitor his former wife's movements in direct violation of an active restraining order. This pathological behavior went far beyond a simple boundary violation. His ex-wife also recounted how Xavier routinely terrorized her, sending sinister videos about missing women to imply she would suffer the same fate, and court records explicitly state he once threatened to bury her right in front of their own children. In another terrifying incident, Xavier allegedly struck Ciara in the face with a firearm and slammed her head against a car window during an argument while she was pregnant. Public records further describe repeated, aggressive acts toward her, even while she was actively holding their infant son. All of this leads to a singular, undeniable conclusion. Xavier Breland was not a husband driven to the edge by a sudden moment of passion. He was a volatile individual with a documented history of severe physical aggression, intimidation, and manipulation. For a man of his nature, a woman leaving him was not just a typical breakup, it was an intolerable personal defeat. These horrifying details in his criminal record, the constant monitoring, the overt threats, the fixation on control, and the insidious use of tracking devices, perfectly explain why Ciara lived in absolute terror and why she knew she had to engineer her escape with absolute strategic precision. Once it became glaringly obvious that Ciara had never actually returned to Indiana, and that her final confirmed sighting occurred in Johns Creek, the multi-agency investigation pivoted directly toward her mother-in-law's residence. Because Ciara was verified alive and present at that location on February 24, 2022, at 7:17 p.m., the property loomed as a potential crime scene. In April 2022, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, working alongside the Johns Creek Police Department, secured a search warrant and launched an exhaustive forensic examination of the home on Highgate Manor Court. Forensic teams executed their duties with meticulous precision, deploying specially trained cadaver dogs capable of detecting human remains and microscopic traces of blood. While the official results of this search were kept under wraps, the utilization of these highly specialized animals made one reality perfectly clear. Investigators were actively searching for a body. Detectives then trained their focus on the physical evidence buried inside the house. In a shocking development, forensic teams began removing literal pieces of the home's interior. Sections of carpeting were sliced out, and portions of a mattress were seized from the mother-in-law's residence. The precise goal of these actions was to uncover blood splatters, or any material evidence that could explain exactly what transpired after Ciara crossed that threshold on February 24th. If a violent crime had taken place within those walls, investigators believed her body had likely been removed and transported to a secondary location. The forensic raid heavily supported the theory that Xavier's story about a late-night trip to an Indiana convenience store was merely a calculated smokescreen, a desperate attempt to redirect law enforcement's attention away from Georgia and fabricate a false alibi in Indiana. With documented proof of his criminal past and potential forensic clues mounting, authorities pushed into the next phase of their investigation. Following Xavier's arrest, on the separate stalking and firearm possession charges, detectives gained full access to his recorded jailhouse phone calls, uncovering yet another layer of chilling manipulation. While speaking with his children, Xavier completely altered his narrative. He explicitly told them that Ciara had been abducted and would never be coming back. This jailhouse statement directly contradicted the story he had originally spun for police, exposing his blatant dishonesty. While Xavier remained behind bars, the search for Ciara exploded onto an unprecedented scale. Law enforcement agencies and dedicated volunteers combed through more than 85,000 acres across 3 states, Georgia, Tennessee, and Kentucky, trudging through dense forests, sweeping public parks, and searching riverbanks in a relentless effort to locate her body. To aid the massive search, authorities publicly broadcasted Ciara's unique physical identifiers, specifically highlighting 3 distinctive tattoos: 3 trees etched onto her ring finger, a sun along her rib cage, and a Florida State University arrow on her wrist. Investigators desperately appealed to anyone traversing remote landscapes, hunters, anglers, and hikers alike. Every single tip and suspicious sighting was exhaustively vetted in the agonizing hunt for answers. Yet, despite the monumental cross-state efforts of federal agents and local police, not a single trace of Ciara was found. Her disappearance, a case believed to have begun as a violent crime in Georgia before being masked by a fabricated timeline in Indiana, remained frustratingly unsolved. After spending several months behind bars, Xavier Breland filed a motion requesting a bail reduction, boldly claiming he needed his freedom to get his life back on track and resume working as a truck driver. Despite fierce, emotional objections from the Locklear family, who warned the court that he posed an imminent danger, a judge lowered his bond to $100,000. Xavier paid the bond and walked free. A pivotal court hearing regarding his unlawful possession of a firearm, the very weapon discovered after his bizarre, accidental garage gunshot incident, was scheduled for December 28, 2023. Xavier Breland never showed up. His failure to appear marked a staggering turning point in the saga. The moment he skipped bail and vanished into thin air, authorities immediately issued a fugitive warrant for his arrest. The grim irony was impossible to ignore. Federal agents and local police were no longer searching for just one missing person, but two. This critical escalation injected a chaotic layer of complexity into an already tangled investigation. Amid the ongoing legal turmoil, a vital piece of justice prevailed. Ciara's parents, Nick and Kelly Locklear, were officially granted legal custody of their grandson Jackson, ensuring the boy would grow up in a safe, loving environment far removed from his father. Kelly Locklear has remained vocal in her conviction that her daughter was terrified of Xavier and had absolutely no intention of ever returning to Indiana. While the court proceedings for the firearm charges have been postponed indefinitely, the Locklear family and law enforcement continue to plead with the public for any information that could locate Xavier and, above all, bring Ciara home. Her body has still not been recovered, and the case remains wide open.